inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It just was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne, and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos. I'm your host, Janet Carolesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alikleson. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter. And our guest today is Rebecca Hardcastle Wright, and we are coming to you live from... what is this? Revolution Radio. So before I bring on Rebecca, I want to bring on Dr. Sasha Alikleson to see how he's coming in. Sweetheart, are you there?
I'm here, and we're ready to hear Rebecca, whatever's the latest, little background on her history and what's hot.
Welcome to the show, Rebecca. Yeah, what have you been doing since last we talked? You've been jet-setting around the planet and writing a bunch of stuff? What have you been up to?
I've been pretty busy. I was trying to think, when was the last time? Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Absolutely always a delight to be with you. I was trying to think when the last time I was with you. It's probably a couple years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I try to get everybody at once a year, but sometimes 2 years goes by, and boy, I had one person like 3 or 4 years went by, and it's like, wow, that went fast. But yeah, remind me, like, drop me a letter in about a year and say, hey, I'd like to come back on. We'd love to keep up with you.
Thank you. I was in Washington, D.C. I moved to Washington, D.C. to work with Dr. Edgar Mitchell and his Quantrek organization, and I was there for about 6 years, from about 2011 until almost 2017, almost 18, and then we moved back to Phoenix. So I'm back in Phoenix and loving being back in Phoenix. And
is it hot there now?
Very.
Yes.
It's okay. We're all used to it.
Take it.
I guess our blood's different. I don't know.
Yeah, you're a different species than I am.
I think. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. So great. And so what about professionally? I mean, that was professionally. You were there with Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And then he passed.
Right.
And did... I know there's different people that picked up where he left off, so the organization is still going strong.
Well, Quantrek isn't. Yeah, Quantrek was. He actually put that to rest.
Okay,
just
so
right before he died. Yeah, so that organization. I think are you referring to Free?
Free, yes, because I know he co-founded Free.
Yeah. Free is a different organization. That's Ray Hernandez. I work directly with Edgar in 0 Point Energy. We were researching 0 Point Energy, consciousness and the ET presence, extraterrestrial presence. Mm-hmm. I think that I was probably asked to join his team of scientists because I'm an experiencer, which says something about Edgar and how he was going about his research. It was a really interesting time. I was the representative for Quantrek in Washington D.C. So I was doing some lobbying. I set up meetings with Podesta. I mean, that went into WikiLeaks, so we can talk about that at some point. That's a really interesting story. Yeah, it's funny how that happened. But just meeting people, trying to talk about disclosure, trying to talk about the possibility for 0 Point Energy, how we can move that forward, what was going on in terms of the climate, and what was going on in terms of ufology and UFO research. So it was a very interesting time. And then when he passed away, well, actually right before he passed away, he became rather ill and wasn't really able to work those last year or two of his life, probably about the last year of his life. So I was just in that in-between time that we go through in human life where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had actually just published Exoconsciousness, Your 21st Century Mind, and was doing my book launch when Edgar reached out and asked me to join his team. So I was just caught between looking at my career and saying, okay, do I go to work for Dr. Mitchell? Do I stay in Exoconsciousness? Weighing that back and forth. And I of course, eventually chose to work with Dr. Mitchell, and I'm so glad I did. It was just a steep learning curve with the scientists and learning about new kinds of technologies that were being brought forth by people and trying to get the mainstream. This is all during the Obama administration to open up to alternative technologies. So I'm so happy I did that. But then when Quantrek folded, I was left in Washington, D.C., not sure where I was going to go next. And I just stayed quiet for a while, probably about 6 months. I just stayed quiet and just kind of felt my way through what I was going to do. And then it just came to me that I really needed to return back to exoconsciousness. And what I did was I created a mastermind with some friends of mine that were experiencers all over the world, and people that I had worked with in different areas, and we just started meeting. And I would have these monthly mastermind meetings, and people just got to know each other. They were all originally my friends and colleagues, and so then they all met each other, which was such an exciting time. I don't know. Do you remember Cynthia Crawford?
I loved Cynthia Crawford.
Actually, one of the reasons that this all happened was I was home in D.C. one day, and Cynthia called me on the phone, and she's like, "Rebecca, what are you doing?" And my response to her was, "Well, I'm just, I'm here. I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do." And she goes, "You've got to do your exoconsciousness. You've got to get this started." And I still have that email.
Oh my goodness!
And that was really the beginning of putting together this mastermind. And now this mastermind has grown into a nonprofit, the Institute for Exoconsciousness.
So with the mastermind, are you still meeting? Because sign me up. I want to go.
Well, we're not meeting as such, but I hope we can talk about the Institute and what the Institute's doing, because I'd love to have you involved in it.
Please.
I think what we're doing has never really been done before. And I find it so exciting, and it just kept opening. I came back to Phoenix about the time that Cynthia got really sick.
Oh.
So I got to be with her, as she transitioned. I got to meet with her a couple of times as she transitioned, and then, was there for her memorial service. And I just feel like, real special people are around us. Cynthia's around us. Edgar's around us, and just strengthening.
I'm getting massive goosebumps as you're saying this. I mean, it's freaky. It's like my skin is just all chicken. Yeah. So yes, she's here. I got to see her at the UFO Congress, and she knew she was dying, and she said, "I've got to run over here. I'll be right back to talk to you." And she didn't make it back, and I didn't see her again. But I looked into those beautiful eyes, and even though she was dying, they were just bright and conscious. And she said, "I'm going back to the ship. I already know where I'm going. They want me on the ship." Yeah,
that's exactly where she wanted to go. I mean, she was very very intentional with her passing and the work she was going to do, and the people that she was going to bring together. And so she's always been part of the Institute, quite frankly. Which is a fun thing.
Yeah. So you weren't there when she actually left her body, but you were there. Part of
right. I had seen her a few days before, and actually one of my good friends, Annie Getchum, I don't know if you've met Annie. She's here.
Yeah.
You know Annie, yeah. Annie really stayed with Cynthia during her whole transition. I mean, every day she was at Cynthia's house and with her during that transition, and just holding that space and being her friend, and just doing all of those just incredibly loving things. She would take her out to lunch sometimes. She would do her hair. She would, make food when friends would come over. Annie was just
Annie's a dear.
Very angelic.
I had Annie on my show. And she's wonderful. She's just wonderful. So that's good to know. See, these are all you people are my friends. I meet you at conferences, and then it's good to see that. I'm over here in Maui, so I'm kind of isolated. But it's good to see that you're connecting and working with each other. It's like a big family. That's awesome.
Yeah. So a lot's happened. I made a lot of connections in Brazil. A man in Brazil actually reached out to me a couple years ago and said that the word exoconsciousness came to me around, I don't know, maybe 2000, 2003. I don't know the exact date, but around that time. And it came to me just as I was waking up in the morning. And the word was just given to me. And so then I started, writing about it and speaking about it. Well, this wonderful man, Juliano Pizzotti, who is outside of Sao Paulo, Brazil, emailed me and said, wow, I woke up one morning recently and that word exoconsciousness came to me, and he said, so I wrote this little book on it.
Wow.
And he runs like a spiritual circle group. They're very involved in, do you know what spiritism is?
Spiritism. Well, I know what spiritual is. What is spiritism?
Spiritism is part of that kind of Portuguese, French, long line, Allan Kardec, into this whole linking of spirituality and science. With different kinds of like table tipping, mediumship, that, automatic writing, lots of seance kind of work. And so he had been very active but also very active in ufology in Brazil. So he reached out to me and he's like, so then this word came to me. I wrote this booklet, and then I was like, oh my golly, I've got to look on the internet and see who else is using this word. Mm-hmm. And he said, Rebecca, I found you. He goes, you're coming to Brazil. So for 2 years now, I've gone to Brazil and worked with the Brazilian community. It's just been an incredible awakening and advancement in my personal growth. Working with the Brazilians and what they have to offer. Their culture is just remarkable, and the people that just the culture that the people live is just it's like nothing I've ever seen. For example, most of the people I meet in Brazil are professional people, oftentimes, bankers, university professors, ER doctors, physicians, and almost all of them. For example, one couple, I will just give you that example. One couple, he works with neural marketing, where you look at what the brain kind of wants to gravitate towards buying. So he's back and forth between Sao Paulo and Miami, and his wife is a physician in Sao Paulo, and a couple days a week they go and work as spiritual healers at a clinic.
Wow!
And he was the one that introduced her to the spiritual healing. But these spiritual healing clinics, I know, when we think Brazil, we think John of God and, the whole mess that kind of happened. But there is a culture in Brazil of spiritual healing. And these clinics are just all over the country. And we were taken to some of these clinics. I'm working with a couple women that run a clinic there in Sao Paulo that hundreds of people come to. They come and to be healed. Their pets come to be healed. They bring their pets. Aww. And there's just this very natural affinity to the power of spirituality that the Brazilian people have, and they're just very confident and very at ease with their spiritual abilities. So we go in this clinic, and there's it's a big room full of people waiting to be healed. Okay, and so they're sort of having a motivational talk and songs and whatever. Then they take me back to this back room, and people are lined up on these benches waiting to go to this actual spiritual healers who are trained. They go through a 3-year training process. So it's not just, I'm a spiritual healer, I'm going to heal you. They go through a 3-year training process. It's really quite rigorous. And they took me to a back room, and there were probably 4 or 5 tables back there with people that were being worked on. One of the healers was working with an aquatic extraterrestrial. One was working with, I believe, a reptilian. And one was a shaman from the Amazon who was healing with the shamanic energies. And so people would wait their turn, go be on these tables, but the people were also hooked up to computers. Some of the clients were hooked up to computers because they have been scientifically gathering metrics and data on all of their healing work. So there's an overlay of a very scientific approach to this. So then when you finish your healing session, then you go to another room where there's probably, 12 or 15 Reiki beds, and then you receive kind of a grounding Reiki session.
Wow, sounds great.
I know. It's always been, I don't know if you know that about me, but I come from a religious tradition. Actually was ordained in the United Methodist Church, and I went to seminary at Boston University School of Theology. And it always confused me that Christians were never really into healing. I never got that. It's like, excuse me, I think this is what it's supposed to be about. You're supposed to be healing people. And for many years, I just kind of held that disconnect about religion. It's like, why isn't this happening? And so, sure, people would pray or whatever, but there was never like this all out, I'm going to heal you, I'm going to help heal people kind of thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, my mother kind of forced me to go to this evangelistic thing, and it was like Catherine Coleman, and people would come up and she'd lay on the hands and they'd go, healed, hallelujah.
Yeah,
I was exposed to that. I didn't really believe her. I don't know. I was just like, I don't believe this, but I was exposed to it. Yeah, it was interesting. Right. But, my little spiritual New Age groups, we've done, you put somebody in the middle and you send them healing energy, and you might lay hands on and just send them healing energy. So we've done a lot of that over the years. And so, you make sense. So why, and isn't Brazil, they're a Catholic culture, right? Originally?
Well, I think it's they have this whole cocktail there. So they've got Catholics, they've got a lot of Roman Catholics, they've got a lot of evangelicals. The evangelical church is very big. The Catholic charismatic movement is very big in Brazil. Along with, then of course, the Amazonian, the shaman tradition from the Amazon. And then you have the whole, the Portuguese that settled Brazil. They were the slave traders. They were the primary culture of slave traders, and they brought a lot of Africans into Brazil. So when I'm at these conferences, then there'll be people, from the Ubuntu tradition. You'll see the women all dressed in white with the shell necklaces, and they all work together.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I just really liked how in Brazil they take it seriously. And it's always a service. I mean, I don't know of any situation where anyone pays for it, but the service aspect, but also the aspect that they're going to scientifically document this information of what they're doing.
So what are they finding?
Well, the last time I was there, I wanted to do some work with the physician. Actually, this woman is, she's the head of physicians at a major Brazilian hospital. And she runs this clinic. And she had some personal challenges, so we really didn't get to, do as much talking about that. But that's something that I'm really going to explore in terms of what they're turning up. But a lot of their spiritism comes from this man in the 1880s called Allan Kardec. And Kardec with a K. And Allan Kardec did a lot. He was probably one of the initial people that really began to look at how we scientifically can document and have a conversation about spirituality and spiritual ability. So they take this very seriously as a scientific field, no different than medicine.
It makes sense to me. We used to take it more seriously with, spiritualism, and now it seemed like we went into something else over the last few years. But so I pulled up Allan Kardec. Okay. Hope I have the right one. Allan Kardec?
Yeah, I think that's his name.
Spirituous.
Yeah, spirituous.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to look him up.
So they literally, another thing I really like about the Brazilians is they do study groups. So Allan Kardec's work is rather dense when you read his books, and they literally they get together in groups and kind of sort of like a Platonic kind of thing, sort of like Plato's ideas. And they read chapters and they discuss them, and they sort of hold this space in a community for ideas and learning.
Fascinating. So are you incorporating some of what you're learning there into your work here in Phoenix and the United States?
Well, I'm incorporating, they're part of our institute. Giuliano is Pizzotti, the man in Brazil with whom I work, one of the people I work with in Brazil. He is on our board for the Institute for Exoconsciousness. And what we're doing, Janet and Sasha, is we are a nonprofit that is supporting ET and multidimensional experiencers who are actually conscious experiencers. So,
right.
So we're not really doing what, someone that we doing like an experiencer group, or, someone that would be doing, like Costa ET, Let's Talk. Uh-huh. It's more of like an introductory, initiatory organization. We're really an organization for a seasoned experiencer. I mean, it doesn't really matter the age, but that they have had ongoing contact, continuing contact, and that contact is conscious.
And so that's me. So what would you do with me?
So with you,
I'm looking to get more connected. I feel isolated over here.
Right. So help me out. So what we do, Janet, is what we're creating. Then we're looking at literally building an exoconscious civilization. So a civilization is different than a culture. As a culture is more about ideas and dreams and literally ideals that you want to, and messages that you want your community to have. A civilization is the actual doing. It's the technology. It's the farming. It's the educational institutions. It's those people who are out doing things, which may or may not encompass the culture. Right. So what we are looking at are conscious experiencers, ongoing experiencers, who are doing something with their contact. So what kind of
doing do you do?
For example, we have artists. We have people who are making and doing inventions. We have people who are scientists, like they're studying different properties. For example, we have a group that studies psychokinesis. We have a group that is literally using star language. We have a group that are healers, are using their conscious contact as healers. So it's more of not only a conscious contact, but using it in their professional life. So you would be a communicator.
Right.
So you would be using your contact in your work as a communicator.
So I interview all these people. I help them get their timeline, their story.
Sure.
So they can speak about it more centered and conscious rather from victim. Realizing most of the ones lately, they are conscious contactees. And they're getting, a lot of them are getting downloads on an ongoing, almost nightly basis, and information about, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it, but right now I'm collecting it, broadcasting it, encouraging everybody to write it up, and trying to get these books. I know we're moving away from books, but still some people like to read. So get it down in an organized form.
Well, you're a communicator. So
I'm a communicator, right.
Yeah.
And when I went to a table tipping back in 1993 or 4, the group was called Your Spiritual Center in Oahu, run by a spiritualist, a couple of spiritualists. One was Arthur Pacheco, who channeled Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. It was wonderful. And his real voice came through. His real voice came through. It was like, wow, this isn't this guy's voice. And then I found a recording of Arthur Conan Doyle and Arthur Pacheco. And it was back then those people channeled the real voice of the person coming through, who was alive and sometimes recorded. So anyway, but they said, oh, I'm the historian. I haven't incarnated a lot of times here. I've had other incarnations. My soul origin is primarily from out there, right? But I'm here to catalog and be the historian and get the communicator, and I'm also known as the key. Apparently when I get connected to the supercomputer of existence, I can bring in the information to a group. So I've done that a couple times. So anyway, but okay, so I want to utilize who I am more and do more. I feel an urgency right now. You have a lot of contact experiencers that are going, I feel like it's time to accelerate the work and do more.
Oh, and there's some experiencers that have come forth that are literally been told, you're not allowed to come forth until just recently. And it's like the veil is dropped for them. It's like, okay, you can come forth now. It's okay. But they were conscious that they were held back for a reason, which is very, very interesting. But, this whole institute idea, it came really from two streams. That the first stream of inspiration for the Institute for Exoconsciousness came from when I was working with Ruth Hover, who was part of John Mack's peer group.
Oh, okay, yeah.
His peer group that he did where kind of like the initial people, Leo Sprinkle and people like that who were initially beginning to, as professionals, to study contactees. And she was here in Phoenix. She ran probably one of the longest running experiencer groups in the nation. And I was with her for years. She was my mentor, my friend, my guide. And of that small experiencer group, maybe had 15 people in it that went regularly. I mean, out of that experiencer group, by the time Ruth passed away, there had been like 8 books written. There had been inventions. Yes. There had been these, people had gone into professions as healers. And I saw what amazing, powerful gifts that this group of people had to bring forth. So that was one stream. And then the second stream was when I worked with Edgar, and we were working with the contract and the 0 point energy. And what we were doing was talking to different scientists who were doing experiments in 0 point energy to see if we could get them some funding and some kind of, scientific validity so they could get their foot in the door of some kind of, recognition for the science that they were doing. And there I started bumping into experiencers again.
Wow.
And I just thought, okay, are you looking? It's kind of like, it was like a purposeful, unveiling to me that I began to see this. And so we really talk about exoconsciousness as that it's an innate human ability, like we all have it. And this innate human ability to connect and communicate, and most importantly, to co-create with extraterrestrials and multidimensionals.
Now, I want to ask you a question, then I want to pass the talking stick to Dr. Leslie because she's been quiet, but I want to ask this question. So with these inventions, I have a man, Dan Cooper, and he's reinventing the work, all the different drives that he experienced and the technologies when he was in the 20 and Back program. So he came back and he said, no, I've got to reinvent this. But every time you have somebody reinventing, he's working on patents, but they get blocked by, I want to call them the Illuminati or whatever they are. And they don't want this technology to get out there because they want to keep us in the Stone Age here. So have you had that same kind of experience where all these technologies are coming up, but there's this block? And I have been requesting from when I go to the meetings, and I go to these huge council meetings with 100,000 beings, and I say, please do some intervention because, we're being kept in the Stone Age. What are you finding?
Well, I found that for sure when I was in Washington, D.C. with Dr. Mitchell and trying to bring forth this work. And what's happened is that, a lot of patents are stolen. I mean, that's our reality. And, if you know anything about the secret space program, you know that all of that research is, not only funded, but funded to a great extent, well funded.
Right.
So,
well funded, yes.
And part of me, when I was in DC, was sort of stunned, about the reality of what was really going on in terms of intelligence and in terms of, major, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, these multinational corporations that kind of run our technological landscape, as well as Google and Amazon, and how they all had been given a leg up by intelligence and by the government. And I got really deep into how that all happened, what the history of it was, how it came to be, Catherine Austin Fitts and the missing trillions of dollars, and Joseph Farrell, and I had to really pull myself up and just say, wait a minute. This is our reality. This is what is going on now. The government is still trying to run everything. The government's still trying to say this it's like the old mystery schools, that held this ET information for so many years, and they weren't allowed to bring it out. And so I just made up my mind that that one of the reasons I'm here is to be supportive in any and every way that I can with people who want to do art and technology and science and communication and healing with what the information and experiences that they're receiving through their ET and multidimensional contact. And I don't have all the answers. I certainly don't know, how it's going to happen, but it's really about human freedom and human liberty and human individuality and creativity. It's not about big government. It's not about, it's not about a secret program. It's not about, this whole lockdown, and it's about humans. And so I just decided I can sit home and get very upset. I don't know if you're familiar with Alana Freeland's work in the ionized sky.
Oh, yeah.
Space
I had her on.
That's just, I know that's real. That's reality. This is what we're dealing with. But it's almost become more or less a, just kind of a sideline. Mm-hmm. I just get up every day and work with our institute and work with the amazing experiencers that are joining us all around the world. And I just slowly move it forward and don't really worry about, is somebody going to steal a patent, or is somebody going to, attack me on social media? I just don't worry about that anymore.
I'm where you are, and I asked them, I go, what do you want me to do? And they just say, keep doing what you're doing. So every day you get up and you see what's most important and you do it. And I keep interviewing it. And I think these interviews that we're doing and the books that are being written and all the stuff we're doing is on Facebook and social media and all that is creating some kind of critical mass, tipping point.
Yes.
And so we're doing it. We don't have to do more than what we're doing. We're doing it. So I had a man, Kevin Briggs, and
I know Kevin really well.
Oh my God, his story was so conscious. And who else did I have lately? I'm trying to look at my book here. I was talking to Earl Grey Anderson. That was wonderful. I talked to Penny Bradley. Who did I talk? Oh, Bruce Cornett. Oh my God. I'm
Bruce.
I'm
Bruce
having
amazing.
all these incredible conversations with people that are totally conscious and recovering memories. And I think we already have a disclosure with the amount of people, in the court of law that would count. That's testimonials. So, and I want to give
that's
Sasha
history. I just want to say that one of the ways that we brand ourselves or label ourselves is that we are literally a post-disclosure community. So we are creating an exoconscious civilization as a post-disclosure community.
Right. And so I work on other planets at night. I have a full-on job. I'm working on I call it Nibiru. They had a lot of devastation, so they have all these cities that are empty and they're preserved. They didn't get destroyed. The population died. And so I said to them, well, why don't we relocate some homeless people from different planets? So I've been working on that project. We're bringing in people from all over the universe or the galaxy or whatever it is.
Wonderful.
And they're starting to restore it. So these buildings are really, tall ceilings, so they're 30 feet tall or 20 feet tall or whatever.
Oh, wow.
So they're building stories in between, and they're making it fit for the smaller populations, and they're having fun. They're learning skills, and the last time I checked,
it's the doing. It's the doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not about the analysis. So I just want to make clear, we are a post-disclosure community who are building an exoconscious civilization, and we speak for ourselves. So our story doesn't have to be vetted through a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a therapist. We speak for ourselves. And I think that's really the first time in ufology that this has really happened with experiencers, that we're starting to speak for ourselves.
I love that, because I get so many people, they argue about that truth. They go, where is that? What is this? That truth? God, are you God? And you have the only truth? Are we fighting religions here? It's like everybody has their personal truth.
Yeah.
And it's not for you to deem somebody else insane just because you don't agree with their story. Okay, Sasha, you've been too quiet. Come on, baby. What do you want to say? Speak up. I can hear you over there.
Okay.
Hi, Sasha.
From my perspective, it seems to me that everything's perfectly as it should be, and that the challenges that have made conscious contactees ready to go forth at this time, and especially you yourselves, both the two of you, are both the product of this system that's now reached the level of perturbation that it's ready to evolve into a larger system. But from my unique perspective, I go for not polarization but trinity, and I say, is there some way, instead of having an enmity with the ruling people of this planet, who can we find some way that they are honored and we are honored too? Perhaps it's a little different or out of step, but that's how I look at it. Everything is perfectly the way it is, and this is even if things are junk, this is a perfect day to live who you really are, and it's a perfect day to die too. So dig it.
Oh, I love that. I love that whole Trinitarian and, holding things together like that, and making space for all that are here. I mean, I think as we deal in this cosmic consciousness, we become aware of how much we don't know. And groups that we may label as Illuminati or the elite or whatever, they had their reasons for what they did, and they had their messages and they had their guidance.
Yeah. For me, we're researching, the backstory on that, and a lot of them were the Anunnaki, and they were just as complicated as humans, and they all had their perspectives, and they were inclined. They weren't all good, they weren't all bad, they were just beings, people, and having experiences, and they had their problems too. So, anyway.
Yeah. One of the things to look at, what is the sense of self that you're identifying with? And as you mature and reflect upon what that self is, you realize you're all of the levels of consciousness, from all of them simultaneously. And, that's what I think, that there's sort of a chain of consciousness that is universal. Radin found that in so-called primitive cultures and other very diverse cultures, people still come to the same conclusion. What do you include in your self-concept? And whatever that is, whatever the boundary of that, the non-self, the part of you that you think isn't you, is the part of you that you can resonate with and ultimately become one with. And you can, if you stay on a level, that's what's called the incest of a level of consciousness. And when you transcend it, by embracing both those self and not self, whatever that was at your particular level, then you can go to the next level of consciousness, but you don't lose any of the lower levels. They're just incorporated in a larger whole. That's how I look at things.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Actually, one of the things about exoconsciousness is that it really is about self. It's not about being diagnosed by some outsider. It's not really about trying to prove whether or not the aliens had on a blue suit or a purple suit, or how many fingers they had or whatever. It's really this whole contact is just about who am I as a human? Who am I as a self? Who am I as a human? Who am I as a conscious being who is, progressing through, as you so beautifully stated, these different states that we go through, and the growth that we are all collectively gaining at different levels and at different times.
Right. Yeah, I think they were not limited to one form. Time is just the illusion. So I think we are simultaneous in many lifetimes or forms or levels of existence. And so sometimes you can meet yourself and realize that you're doing a lot more than you think you're doing when you just identify as being human. And in this avatar here, we're actually doing a lot more. Wow.
Oh, and I'd also like to say, I was also remembering when you talked about healing. I studied with a fellow named Brujoy, a doctor, and we used to have these circles where we concentrate our energy. We learned to, with physical things, you say right hand hot and heavy, right hand hot and heavy, and you're holding a thermometer and your hand is on a scale, and it really happens. And so you understand how electric energy works. And so we would put people in the middle and we healed with our hands. And this is an ancient tradition. People
truly.
In the Indian tribe that we belong to, that's one of our sacraments, hands-on healing. All peoples do that practically.
Yes. I don't know if you've gone into depth on Ray Hernandez's free survey, but he asked me to write a chapter in his Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And I did a chapter on looking at that, looking at all that survey data that he collected over, I think it was 5 years, 100 countries, like almost over 4,000 people. I mean, it was such a beautifully scientifically done survey. And he asked me to write an exoconscious analysis of it. And literally, I just had to sit with that information for a while. I just had to sit with it because it was so powerful. I didn't want to make any conclusions. I just wanted to listen to what the survey had to say to me. And from that then, I was, after a few days, it took a few days of just reading through it again and again and again, listening, letting it saturate without drawing conclusions. At the end of that period, I was really stunned at how it aligned with all of my ideas for exoconsciousness and conscious contact. Certainly not, it wasn't all in alignment, but much of it was in alignment. And Sasha, one of the things that came out of that survey is how many experiencers know that they can heal people by touching them.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes.
And I just, my day job is I work with what's called a functional physician. Have you heard that term? It's sort of the new term, functional physician. Well, he's a USC Stanford trained MD, and he left. He practiced many years as a physician. His name's Dr. Ron Peters. And he left mainstream medicine because he saw that, we were just, treating the symptoms, never the cause. And so he went into what was called alternative medicine, complementary medicine. Then today, I think they use the term functional medicine with it. But he very much, now that I've said it, you'll probably start to see functional medicine. It's one of those things. But, one of the things that he believes is that as a physician that he can only heal someone to a certain point. And until they can deal honestly with their trauma and their emotional issues, that then they can have true healing. And so what I do is I work as a therapist with his clients. That many of them are chronically ill and critically ill. Some of them have been sick for 30 years.
Right.
And are finally getting traction and finally on the way to health and doing things that they never dreamed that they'd be able to be doing at this point in their lives. So, and a lot of it is just, so I was fortunate here in Phoenix to work with a group of traumatologists here in Phoenix that did a lot of technological trauma research with brain states and brain waves and that sort of thing. And we worked with some traumatologists that did research with polar bears and what happens when you're traumatized, what happens to your neural system. So I learned so much from that neural research that they were doing and just working with them and working with myself, quite frankly. So I was able to sort of take what I had been educated in and trained in because I was a pastoral counselor for many years at a university. So I was able to then, move that into this, new areas and new ways of looking at treatment and how people literally can heal once they understand what their neural system's doing to them.
Right. Well, that's what Dr. Lesson and I have been working with people. We got together about 23 years ago, and a lot of it's psychosomatic. And if you get to the underlying cause, you go back to regressing back to their childhood and religious cultural conditioning and all the trauma, and you help them cathartic release and reprogram. We've seen, I'm not saying, claiming we cure cancer, but we've seen cancer go into full remission.
Oh, yeah. I believe it. Yeah. Don't excuse yourself for it. Yeah, absolutely.
I just don't want to get sued. Anyway.
No, but, that happens. And I think that more and more people are going to be, this physician I work with cures cancer. When he was a friend of mine when I moved back to Phoenix. I called him and I said, I just wanted to let you know that I was back in town. He goes, good, get to work tomorrow. I said, oh, okay. So that, go ahead.
It's really interesting. I think that the listener could, if you have some place inside of you that it hurts right now, you could even imagine there's this little teeny you that goes in a convenient place and travels down to that area that's giving you, say, pay attention to me, and let little you look at that and touch it and let it communicate with you, and let your touch give it some healing energy. And then you can go back out, and that's the beginning of a dialogue that you'll go on with after this program's over. But you can also disregard it and forget it, because it is a post-hypnotic suggestion.
And it works.
And it works. Yeah. Oh, we're coming up. We have 5 minutes before our break, so let's. What do we want to convey? This is exciting conversation. So go ahead, teach us some more. You're really opening me up to what's going on. Like I said, I'm over here isolated. You're there in the heart of it. Phoenix is a happening place.
Phoenix is a very happening place. Yeah. I had a hard time in Washington D.C.
Oh, yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a different perspective. And yet, they hold their energies for different reasons. I don't know if you've ever had William Tiller on your radio show, or if he ever does radio shows. But
William Tiller, who is William Tiller?
He's a physicist.
Tiller.
Yeah, Tiller. Yeah, he does. I think last I heard he was living here in Scottsdale. But what he's done is he's created conscious machines.
Ooh.
And the conscious machines, literally, he's got evidence of changing pH balance, plus or minus, and just a lot of, kind of like Dean Radin, a lot of intentional kind of healing and moving matter, quite frankly, changing matter.
Wow.
And documenting it scientifically.
I'd love to talk to him. If he has a website, I'll look him up.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll Google him right now. We're talking. Yeah, if you have anybody that's listening that you have a story and you want to come on, just write to me at aquarianradio@gmail.com, and we will have you on. We're waking up the world. We're gathering all the stories and we're putting them out there, and it's making a huge effect. I get so much feedback of what's going on. Like yourself, we're on the same track and similar track and doing different things, and there's so many out there doing this work, and I know that the media gets overwhelmed with all this gloom and gloom stuff, but I still wake up in the morning and go, yeah, we're making progress. We're doing things. Okay, I found William A. Tiller. I'll see what I can do to contact him. Thank you for the lead.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have his email or not. I may have his email. I'll make a note of it and let you know. I'll also, I don't know if you, are on our newsletter email, but our newsletter has a lot of the experiencers, our exoconscious community, and that are, the different programs that we have, the different people that are healers, the different people that are doing psychokinesis research. We can talk about that, when we come back.
So we want to get on so where do we go to get on your newsletter?
I'll just add you. Oh, the web, it's exoconsciousness.org. Or you can just email me. Go to exoconsciousness.com at my website, and then I'll just add you to the newsletter there too.
Okay. Anybody out there wants to be added, just contact Rebecca. Okay. So I went on. Yes, definitely. And I want to network with all these people and take this to the next level. So we got 1 minute before the break. What do you want to cover in the second half of the show after we come back from the break? Any ideas?
We could talk about more about the Institute, the programs we have. I have a little book that I just published recently, How Exoconscious Humans Guide Our Spacefaring Future. We can talk about that. I've also talked about in the work that I did with Ray Hernandez in the survey, maybe talk some more about, go a little bit more in depth in terms of that. I really came up with as I'm writing it, I came up with Exoconscious Humans as CE6.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, and then we have to talk about what we started, Podesta and DC and what kind of I stumbled upon in DC. That was really quite amazing. Yeah, so we'll probably we'll start with DC and then go to the better stuff afterwards. Yeah, we can always do another show in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So I think we're going to have to. We're not going to get to it all. Okay, so we're waiting for the music. I don't know, Matt, is the music coming? It's 56, and so we're going to.
I would like to have your feedback on it. Terrence McKenna and Nima and others have talked about how important psychoactive and psychedelic were in the race consciousness. Sure. Okay. So
okay,
great.
Topic. Okay, we'll see you in 5.
Thank you.
Back soon. Come back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Wadiya will remain a dictatorship. Oh, be quiet. Why are you guys so anti-dictators? Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prisons with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests.
Tune in Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, for Liberation Nation with Deacon John, where America comes to hear the truth.
I know this is hard for you Americans to imagine, but please try.
Ohio Exopolitics will be on from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A. Mark Schneider will have guests on that will discuss many important topics, including the state of the world today. However, much of the show will be dedicated to the writings of Edward Albert Meyer. Let me read a short passage from one of his writings. Love is the highest principle of creation, and through it, everything exists in absolute logic. All of nature in its indescribable splendor is nothing but the love of creation, which is expressed visibly. The love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. Please join Mark on Ohio Exopolitics from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne, and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay, I think we're back. Aloha and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos. And I'm your host, Janet Kara Lesson, with Dr. Sasha Allie-Klessen, producer Thomas Becker, and our special guest, Rebecca Hardcastle Wright. We're having a great conversation. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on revolution.radio and make a donation this week. We really, really need your donations, and that's what helps us stay in the air. Mad Painter Thomas Becker, how are we doing with our fundraiser?
We need $25.50, and we got $14.97. That leaves $1,053, and we ain't got too many days to go.
All right, come on down and make your donation. Thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring back Rebecca?
Well, I just before we ended, we had just talked about the hypothesis of Terence McKenna and my teacher Stan Groff and others that psychoactive elements, particularly the garden nympha planted in the Garden of Eden, and the idea of ayahuasca in modern times particularly is really opening people to higher spiritual dimensions. And I'd like to know what your take, Rebecca, is on the use of entheogens.
Right. I want to talk about Podesta, so go where you want. Welcome back.
Oh, let me address this. The plants, the plant medicines. I'm a true believer in plant medicine. I'm an avid user of oils and different kinds of. Actually, my grandmother, my great grandmother, for her community she was the herbalist for her community. She was the physician for her community because there weren't any trained medical doctors around, and she was the plant doctor for everyone. When it comes to psychedelic drugs and consciousness, I kind of have two feelings about it. Number one, I think that some people are definitely opened in maybe in ways that they couldn't open on their own with these plants. I have friends that talk about that they just really felt that there was no other way for them to open, and that this was the perfect way. I would just say be careful who you do it with. Be careful who you surround yourself with, because certainly, whether you're doing any kind of mind altering work, whether it's hypnotherapy or drugs or alcohol or plants, just be careful who you're around, because entities are a real thing and energies are a real thing. And I think that when we're open and new to that experience, we have to be very, very cautious and very careful of what we bring in to ourselves. I think the Native Americans are certainly, keenly aware of that. I have some friends that are Native American healers, and they do a lot of attachment, entity attachment, release work with different people that have, kind of gone into areas maybe that they weren't really prepared to go into. So it was interesting. I thought I'd go to Brazil and everybody would be talking about going to the Amazon and doing ayahuasca, and not one person mentioned it to me.
That's interesting.
It's such a big thing here in America. And
yeah.
And not one, I was just at a conference in Brazil with, almost 2,000 people at the conference, and not one person made any mention. They're really into, that this is just a natural your conscious evolvement, the unfolding of your consciousness is just natural. And none of them, have ever made a reference to ayahuasca tea. I thought that was just interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Americans and Europeans flock there.
They flock to all these places that the Brazilians just kind of shrug their shoulders and ignore.
Well, maybe they're not so uptight like we are.
That could be also. Open. And I think that there's a real, there's a part of, we're Americans here. There's a part of our culture that likes to do it fast. Mm-hmm. I want to open up fast. I want to get there fast. I want to be able to do what I'm doing fast. And, one of the things that I've learned in my life is that, this conscious transformation and healing, it takes time.
Mm-hmm. It's
not an automatic cure. It's not a pill. It's not a drug. With using oils, the essential oils that I use, that's just a lifestyle. That's a lifestyle. It's not, I'm going to do it once and, everything's going to be cured. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
It does. It does. And I'm aware that, in the rituals in the Middle Ages and so forth, before that even, anointing meant putting your hands, which can really absorb things, in cannabinol soaked waters, yes. Oils and stuff. They anoint the hands thing is a big deal because you totally relax because of what you're doing.
I love that. I think your hands and your feet are probably, two of in your heart. but just touching people with your hands and the oil part of touching people with your hands. That's a powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just interesting. Dr. Mitchell used to make a comment about, 400 years ago during the Enlightenment, all of science, all of biology, geology, all of the sciences were given over to the universities, and the church was left with consciousness. The church retained consciousness. And I always think that, 400 years, the church had consciousness, and what do they do with it?
Yeah, where do they put it?
Yeah, where'd they put it? What do they do with it? And it was, and I'm sure you're aware of this too, but it was really only until like the 1990s that we began to see, consciousness departments within universities, and even then it was a very tenuous, very small kind of thing. And now today, we have this, now science has taken over consciousness, and it's all about, the brain and neurobiology and metrics and tracking, and, the brain is God, the neural system's God. Mm-hmm. And it's just very interesting because for me, I've always had an awareness that, my consciousness is beyond my body. It's in my body and it's part of my body, but it's also beyond my body.
That's right. So what did, when you were in Washington, let's go back to the beginning of the show, you were talking about Washington, you worked there and you met, what did you say about Podesta? You worked with Podesta?
Well, it was interesting. Yeah. So I was working with Edgar, and we were trying to arrange a meeting with Obama originally. And mm-hmm. so we knew that Podesta was, John Podesta was very involved in the Sci-Fi Channel and Disclosure and the Rockefeller Initiative. I mean, John Podesta has been around disclosure circles for a long, long time. And so
right.
What I did was I just got in touch with John's administrative assistant, and he had left the Center for Progress, the American Center for Progress, and he'd gone over and he was the chief legal counsel for Obama in the White House. And so we approached him, and I was sending emails to johnpodesta.com, at gmail.com. Mm-hmm. And, arranging with his assistant and him to, for Edgar and myself to go in and meet with, Obama. And so he did respond back and said, that, he would arrange first for us to meet with him. And then, after that meeting, we could talk about going in to speak with Obama. And it was very interesting because he said, I'm going to be in town on the week of August 11th in 2014. And so I said to Edgar, I said, you need to make plans. You need to get up here. You need to, we need to go in and we need to make this meeting. This meeting is really important. And bless his heart, at that time, mm-hmm. he was already sick and, I think in a wheelchair. And he just said, I can't come.
Oh.
And I was at first I was stunned. Then I was kind of angry because I kind of felt like, we went to all this trouble and now you don't think that you will come. And then I was sort of, I kind of let it go and knew that he was ill and it wasn't going to work out. We tried to arrange a Skype and whatever. And so really after that happened, I knew that Quantrek was pretty much not going to be functioning as it had before. And so I withdrew from Quantrek and I knew that meeting was over. And then after that, I sent a couple emails to John. I told him about my work with Exoconsciousness. I invited him if he wanted to go to lunch, kind of a DC thing. Yeah. So, that was interesting. And then I kind of forgot about it. I just said, as I told you, I just kind of went into that period where, I was doing some other things. I was trying to think about what I was going to do and just kind of on the cusp of bringing together this Institute for Exoconsciousness and the Mastermind. And so I didn't think anything about it. And then in 2016, I got a call from, I don't know, do you know Victor Vigiani? He's in Canada.
Yeah.
Victor's a good friend of mine. We've been friends for years. And he calls me from Canada one morning. I'm still in bed. And I'm like, he goes, Rebecca, get out of bed. And I'm like, well, why? You know, what's going on? He goes, oh, for God's sakes, go turn your computer on. He goes, WikiLeaks just dumped all of your emails to John Podesta.
Oh my God.
So it had all my emails to John Podesta and, you know, and trying to arrange this meeting with Edgar, and it had him and my phone number on it.
Oh my goodness. You're famous.
So that was interesting for years. I mean, now it's probably been about a year since I've gotten phone calls, but you know, the last 3 years I used to get phone calls. People call me always in the middle of the night for some reason. So they're probably like on their computers, whatever. And they would call me and want to talk. And
so that was where we were heading, you know, before the election.
Yeah.
It was going to go with, into, you know, because Podesta was running Hillary's campaign and it was going to continue. So what happened? Do you have any idea? I mean, it's kind of like the ball got dropped, but then Trump is saying we have the Space Force now, and it's another branch of the military. What's your ideas on that? What do you think happened? Where are we going with this?
Well, it's just funny. Like in 2016, I told my brother who's in Ohio, I said, you know, I really feel like there's kind of a battle in the deep state. And he goes, oh, Rebecca, you know, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know. It's what I saw when I lived there. That's what I saw. Mm-hmm. You know, sides are being chosen. And I said, that's just the feeling I got there. And sure enough, he calls me about a year later. He goes, oh my God, you're right. And I went, yeah, that's what I was there. I saw it. I don't know how familiar you are with John Trump. Do you know John Trump?
No, but I heard that Baron Trump was a time traveler, and that the uncle got the Tesla's technologies.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
He worked with Vannevar Bush. No relation to George Bush. Yeah, so the head scientist for UFO research in DC for many, many years. He worked with Vannevar Bush in what's called the MIT Rad Lab, the radiation lab, studied radar radiation. I mean, it was just like the preeminent, you know, scientific research lab. John Trump was a really brilliant scientist, and you know, just right under Vannevar Bush, and like you said, had access to the Trump information. Trump was very close to Nixon, and Nixon, of course, everybody said, oh, Kennedy took us to the moon. That's not accurate history. You know.
Wait, say that again. Kennedy what?
Kennedy took us to the moon. Kennedy, you know, brought forth NASA. That's not really accurate history. I mean, Eisenhower and Nixon, and you know, Nixon had his fingers in space travel for years.
Right.
So, you know, and Trump was very close to. Go ahead.
He took Jackie Gleason to see the bodies, right?
Yeah. And he did a lot with the whole, you know, just research of UFOs and opening, you know, the different films that were made at the time and the different ufology. And Trump Nixon went to San Clemente and stayed there, I think, for several years after the whole Watergate thing. And then he moved to New York City. And lived next door, I think, to David Rockefeller, of course. And they, and Trump was, you know, he ran in Trump's circles. So, and the whole
so it
Roy
kept
Cohn,
going.
I don't know. Do you know Roy Cohn? You know that name? Roy Cohn was a very, very famous New York lawyer, you know, kind of in cahoots with Nixon. I mean, if anybody knows where all the bodies were buried, it was Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn worked a lot with Senator McCarthy.
Okay.
Do you know Joseph Farrell, the researcher Joseph Farrell?
Yes, Yes.
Okay, so Joseph has a new book out about the McCarthy trials and how Cohn and McCarthy were really digging up the first iterations of the secret space program.
Ooh, okay. We'll have to get that.
And so, you know, Trump's made a couple allusions to the fact that, you know, his uncle told him about nuclear energy before we knew we had nuclear energy.
Right. So are you familiar with the story that his about the book about Baron Trump. I'm going to say Von.
Yeah,
Baron Trump.
That.
And it was written in the 1800s, and it has Trump. Yeah, isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting.
Watch all the YouTubes, everybody. Baron Trump, time traveler.
Yeah, so I think that there always historically has kind of been this battle between, releasing those who want to release information and those who want to keep it private. Right. And it's gone on in government. It goes on in mystery schools. It goes on in organizations. It goes on in think tanks. And it's always this kind of a push-pull battle. I mean, Steiner talked a lot about it. Edgar Cayce talked about it. Blavatsky talked about it. Annie Besant talked about it. People from the mystery schools all discussed this fact that, there was a push-pull. The Theosophical Society decided to bury all of Keely's information as a science that he was bringing forward. So I just think that it's business as usual kind of. And Trump is just such a wild card. I mean, when he announced the Space Force, I think he was at the Naval Academy, or maybe I think the Naval Academy, maybe the Air Force Academy. But I mean, 6 times he said, "Oh, we have invisible planes."
Somebody's over the corner.
He acts like, I don't really know about this stuff, and aw shucks, and he probably knows all about it. No, please. And I think Hillary wanted to really come in and be, the disclosure person. And Janet and Sasha, there's different sides to the story. I mean, if you look at somebody like Ilana Freeland's work, and you look at disclosure in the context of Ilana Freeland's work, the space fence. Are we really talking disclosure, or are we talking about moving to the next phase of, creating a space fence around Earth?
Well, do you think they're trying to kill us all off? And one theory is they've already sold us off as a product, and they've got to deliver, and so they're terraforming the Earth, and that's why they don't care about the fossil fuels, and they're heating up and everything dying, because they want it clean, so it'll be right for the new tenants that are taking over, and they just want all the minerals. They don't care about all the wonderful whales and dolphins and birds and plants. Anyway, that's one of the theories. I mean, there's all these dark theories, and then there's, the light side, and it's really hard to figure out where to go. Are we on? Mm-hmm. I guess I got a bloop. So you said that Project Serpo is not real. That they're talking about with Kennedy, wasn't he aware of the extraterrestrial presence?
Oh, I think Kennedy was I think that's one of the reasons he was. I mean, it's pretty
killed.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons he was assassinated, was because he wanted to share all the UFO information with Russia, and he wanted. And I think McCarthy also. I think McCarthy and Roy Cohn were finding out where the bodies were buried in these programs, these secret programs that were just beginning to be launched back then during the McCarthy era.
Right.
I mean, this has a long history to it.
The disclosure means that the mass murders and kidnapping over long periods of time and millions of deaths have to be accounted for. And the only way you can do that, I think, is to not punish the perps, just to let them confess. But that's what's underneath it. It's not just about space and this and that. It's about the crimes and genocide that have been committed by the intelligence agencies and the mafias that work with them.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I think Alfred Weber talks about that. Some of you, have you discussed that with him?
With Alfred?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he's got really good insight into that whole aspect of the accountability. And I mean, this planet has laws, beyond the books. I mean, there's a law, there are laws of nature, there are laws of our planetary life that that you can violate, but as you say, you have to be held accountable for it.
There's that other thing about, the planet has a consciousness too.
Yes.
And many of us can directly feel, maybe you feel it through your island or your river, but you feel the consciousness of this being that we are in a field with, It's all perfect. Just all you have to do is just realize there isn't any other, and you're one with everything and everyone. And what I'm saying about the Illuminati is you have to not be punitive. If it's eye for an eye, the world will be blind, as Gandhi said. We've got to just all make it work. Every light's got to be allowed to shine, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's that whole going back to that whole contextualizing, like what was the context of the mystery schools at the time when they shut down, and hid Keeley's work? I mean, what was the whole context of the time? I mean, I don't know if you've had, what's his name? He just wrote a book called Origins, and Walter Bosley, that does all the. Yeah, you should have him on. He does all the research on the early aircraft. He maintains that there's historical references and historical information that tracks back to 10 years before the Civil War that we actually had airships.
Wow.
Oh yes. Yes, I've read it too. Some German researchers that developed their airships and wound up stopping once on the East Coast and flying on off to Germany.
Yeah. I mean, he's sort of the preeminent researcher on that aspect of how long this, that we've had information that we haven't. There just seems to be. There almost feels like there's a blueprint or a timetable that's bigger than the individual. That, as you say, encompasses all of the planet.
Yeah. So if this is amazing. Okay, so here's Walter Bosley. I will contact him. Hopefully, out there, Walter, contact us. AquarianRadio@gmail. I want to have you on. So this is the emergence of the breakaway civilizations. He's got a number of YouTubes here. I'll have to go listen to them.
And he's
this goes back way back.
Yeah, that goes way back. He goes into his father and that program, a government program that his father was in. And he also goes on into how the Tuatha Dé that Celtic group, Celtic extraterrestrial group, Tuatha Dé. Are you familiar with them?
No. Well, you have a lot
absolutely,
of stuff.
Yes. Of course.
Tuatha Dé. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, it's a Celtic extraterrestrial group. It's like part of the Celtic history that, they were very obviously extraterrestrials that, landed here and, integrated with humans and brought their technology forth. And a lot of his research Walter's research book goes back into Tuatha Dé. It's pretty fascinating.
Well, I'm watching that show Outlander, and apparently when you touch the stones at a certain time, you can go traveling through time.
Well, I think isn't that what Edgar Cayce called the Two-Eye Stone from Atlantis, the crystal from Atlantis?
Right, and Enki went to the that part of the world after he left that's all the stones. They're part of what Enki, he had the stones in South Africa, and then they went up to the British Isles and they did all those stone circles. That was part of what they did. Go ahead, Sonny.
Well, just the ancient people of the British Isles. So we just had a person on our show, Margaret Wheatland, I think, or something like that. Who basically is the Maria. Oh, it was, and so basically, yes, the skulls from the pre-Roundheads were enlarged with twice the cranial capacity of ours, and it isn't just the British Isles; it's probably all over Northern Europe too. There were extraterrestrials that had twice the cranial capacity of Homo sapiens.
It's pretty fascinating. But I mean, just living in Washington D.C., you just got and being into alternative research as you both are, that you really got a feeling like you were just sitting on a lot of buried information. I mean, whether it's the Smithsonian or the CIA or the NRO or whatever, or people that you would meet, the FBI people you would meet, that there's just an awful lot of people that work in Washington D.C. that have no idea what they're working with, and they're denied the big picture, I guess I would say.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They're just getting a slice.
They're given a job to do. The compartmentalization of DC is really quite shocking. Really quite shocking. And the feeling of not having the freedom to speak up and say things. When people would ask me what I do in DC, I would tell them that, I was an extraterrestrial researcher, working at, Apollo astronaut, Dr. Echo Mitchell, and, but primarily working with extraterrestrial presence and experiencers. A lot of times people in Washington DC would laugh in my face.
Wow.
I mean, cackle in my face.
Yeah. So what did you do when you got cackled at?
I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, whatever. But I mean, I don't think ever since that's the only place where I have gotten that reaction. The only place.
So we have all this stuff really going on, and we have our public still cackling, and nothing's changed over the last 60 years, 70 years. But we have all this information. Like, what are the implications of Trump having time travel? As he's been playing with the timeline? That's one of the questions that people put up on the YouTube. What's been going on? If someone who has time travel, can they manipulate time?
Well, I think we all time travel, quite frankly. I mean,
I do too. I think time travel.
I mean, I don't think Trump's got he certainly doesn't have the only person on the planet with the ability to time travel. I mean, maybe he's consciously aware of who he is and where he came from. I think there's a lot of us like that. I guess I left Washington D.C. with a very clear intention and a clear knowing that, in order for the extraterrestrial experience or information, and most importantly, their work, to be brought forward, that it was not going to be done by the government or by the university. I mean, I can't tell you how many I taught one of the first courses in ufology in the nation here in Scottsdale in 2005.
Yeah, I taught one at Penn State in 1989 to 93.
Yeah, then you were totally one of the first. And so, I mean, I can't tell you how many university people I have approached and, written letters to and gone to meetings with. And I just had, by the time I left DC, I knew that the university and the church and the government and politicians were not going to be the people that really would be the support for ET experiencers, and that we had to do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that, it was time to grow up. It was time for us as an extraterrestrial experiencer community to grow up and to grow into the fact of owning and working with this information and experiences that we've been given, and not to, look to a Louis Elizondo or Tom DeLonge or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or, some president of Harvard or Yale to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. And that's really what the Institute is about. If we envision a culture and a civilization that we're building, co-creating it with extraterrestrials, we humans have to be the ones that are doing it.
I agree. So what would you recommend? How do we start this?
Well, that's really what the Institute's all about. And we're planning our first conference in October 2020. We're going to have it probably in Orlando, so we can bring people in from South America. And we have people from all over the world that are going to be coming. But they're all going to be coming to work. It's not a conference where you sit and listen to a speaker. It's a conference where you come and work. Where you come and meet other healers, where you come and meet other artists, where you come and meet other inventors. And together as a community, we find a way to mainstream the information and the work that we are to bring forth.
I love it. Yeah, I've often said we need to have like a symposium where all the researchers and, like you said, healers and the experiencers, and we come and do some work together. Not just, it's like we're a bunch of talking heads and listening to talking heads. And
well, we all like that. We all kind of like that. Somebody's an expert and they're going to tell us how to do it, and they're going to get up on the stage with their PowerPoint or whatever. It's interesting. Remember when Bob Brown did the International UFO Congress in Laughlin?
Yes.
One of my friends here in Phoenix was part of that early on before Bob took it over. And he said that was always, Jim Delatoso said that conference started out as a gathering of international researchers who were researching UFOs and wanted to get together and exchange information.
I love it.
So what I'm seeing for the Institute is we're an international group of professionals who are using our extraterrestrial experience and our extraterrestrial knowledge, and we're coming together to exchange ideas, information, and most importantly, tools.
So how do you see that unfolding? What does that look like? And how many days would it be? And because you're going to be leading this. Or is this a group that leads this effort for the next conference?
No, the Institute's going to be doing this.
So the Institute is, and so
you're pulling this
you're
together.
Part of the Institute. Are there other people in the Institute?
Oh, yeah, we have a board of directors. We're a nonprofit.
Okay, cool. So anyway, that sounds fascinating because I'd like to see that evolve where we do more research and more connecting the dots. Yes.
But I'm sure you and Sasha are aware. I mean, the government and Hollywood have kind of taken over the UFO narrative.
Well, that's, and I don't.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah, and I love everybody out there. Let me just say that. And a lot of people are my friends, but it's like the narrative is being hijacked just like religions and everything else. So how can we take back the narrative? I think that narrative for ufologists has always been, they have always wanted to listen to the government. They've always wanted to find out what the government knew. That's always been of prime importance for them. So for them to be kind of taken over by Hollywood and, rock stars and government, counterintelligence agents, that's no surprise to me. I always say, if you keep looking, you become your source. And if you're always looking at the CIA, you're going to become the CIA. Right.
If you're always looking at, someplace like that, intel, military, that's who you're going to become.
So how do we take it back?
Well, we don't have to take it back. I mean, I think that there's a certain, I have really good friends that are ufologists, and this is like their time. They are so excited about what's happening, and they're so into the fact that, the Wilson memos released now or whatever, and is it authentic? Is it not authentic? And, Tom DeLonge and, Harry Reid. This is their time. Hey, I'm happy for them. I think it's amazing for them. Is it going to get me where I want to go? No, not in the least. Not in the least. I'm much more interested in what an experiencer from Des Moines, Iowa has to say, or what an experiencer from Sao Paulo, Brazil has to say, or what an inventor who's an experiencer from, Spain has to say. For me, I'm much more interested in that. To me, that's how you really move the information in a transparent way.
Well, I'm interested in getting the technologies that have been repressed out there so that I can live longer. I'm very selfish. I'd like to live past the report yesterday said we're going to die by 2050, and I want to see the planet healed. I want to see everybody healed individually and collectively. I'd like to see
that's just propaganda.
This beautiful planet, and so it's hard to separate what's propaganda and what's real. I mean, we know nothing, actually, unless you're like there on the beach and see the whales wash up, but then you get pictures of the whales washing up, all dead. So what is real out there? You get stories of the plastic island. Somebody's reporting it and bringing it back, and sometimes it's not just stories, but it's like, I have a friend that encountered that. What are you going to say, Sasha? You're over there.
Oh, I don't think we know nothing. I think we know everything. We don't know why.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I also would say that, it's not just a matter of extraterrestrial. It's like other consciousness than you think is yours. So that other could be the things you thought were ghosts when you were kids, or thought you were dreaming of your grandma. Hey. Something else was happening. It's just how you frame it. And I think that Ray Hernandez, who we alluded to a few times, had a story about that really brings it all home when his wife was downstairs with a dog that they were going to take in to die the next day because it was old, and put it to sleep. And she says, "Ray, come down here right away." And he comes down and he says he saw this orb, and he was filled with love. And she said, "It's an angel and the Virgin Mary." And the dog that was all stiff and dying jumped up like a puppy and lived another 2 years. And so you see,
I like that story. I like Ray telling that story. It's cool.
Yeah.
Whether it's from a canine perspective or a Catholic perspective or a lawyer's perspective, they're all valid. We just symbol the elephant of reality according to the limb we grasp.
Absolutely. And I think it's all in where you're, as you said, like we have the consciousness. We know these things. Like one time I was at a conference outside of Philadelphia, and I was starting to doing my talk, and I stopped for a minute, and I was talking about how we become our sources. If we're looking at CIA, if we're looking at military, we're going to become the military and the CIA. We're going to start to think like them. Our consciousness is going to be molded by them because we spend so much time delving into them. And I looked out on the audience, and I just said, how many of you believe that the government still knows things about extraterrestrials and multidimensionals and consciousness that you don't know? And you know what? Most of the room raised their hand.
Uh-huh.
And I was stunned. So what they were saying right there was that they had the belief system that the government and intelligence and the military had information that they didn't have, that their consciousness was not capable of grasping. And I think that when you're an experiencer, you don't believe that anymore.
Well,
that's a big defining moment in consciousness.
As an experiencer, I've seen it all.
Yeah.
But the dilemma, the catch-22 is, I've seen, people brought back from the dead. Maybe I can bring somebody back from the dead. But there's that part of that I believe I'm in the matrix and I'm limited by the matrix. So that's the quandary. I mean, really, we're all Jesus, we're all God, we can do it all, right? But I'm in this belief system. So when I wake up and I go and brush my teeth, I go, wow, I am aging, right? My hair is getting white, but I know I'm an eternal being and I have total control to reverse that because there are people in the secret space program that are regressing people back, Mm-hmm. So that whatever is being done technologically, I have that ability as an eternal mm-hmm. being. But my belief, so it's kind of like the catch-22. Like, how do we bring that into this 3D physicality so we're not, burying our friends and relatives? There's a point where we have this.
That kind of goes into this whole issue that a lot of experiencers talk about is how do you live simultaneously in a 5D world or advanced consciousness and in a 3D world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as more and more people, I think for many eons, religion was the only venue for not living in a 3D world. It was the only venue for living in some kind of transcendental consciousness. Let's call it transcendental.
Mm-hmm.
That was the way that you moved into altered states. That's the way that you moved into advanced consciousness. Today, though, I think that because of technology, because of research into consciousness, because of people getting together and using their consciousness, using the tools of their consciousness, like the Institute, that people are now seeing that, there's other pathways into this transcendental aspect of myself that I can use and bring back. And, we as the Institute are going to be dealing with that. How do you do that? And I guess part of me, when I hear people say, whether it's Elon Musk or whoever it is, that, like we all got to get off planet, the planet's going to die and we all got to get off planet. We all got to leave. Or when I hear experiencers say that I don't like it here, I'm going to leave. It's like, you chose to come here. This is your assignment. Figure it out.
I love the Earth. I remember terraforming it. I was part of the group that came and we were creating it. We're going, okay, what are we going to add now? Let's add a little bit of humanoid life. Let's add some bugs. I have a clear memory of doing that, whatever it was, billions, trillions of years ago, whatever. And so, and other people do, right? I'm not the only one. Everything I'm saying, I'm not anything special. I'm not the only one.
Right.
So that saddens me when someone says, I just want to get off this planet, it's dying anyway. So I'm really devoted to the Earth Project, to the God Project.
So am I. Yeah. That's why I'm here. I'm part of the Earth Project. I'm part of the Human Consciousness Project. And, I know that, I don't know if you've ever, another person you might want to have on your show sometime is Patrick Wood.
Okay, I'm making a list. Boy, I'm going to have to talk to you off air. Patrick Wood. Okay,
Patrick
what's
Wood.
Patrick
He's done
Wood do?
You'll want to watch his 3-part series on technocracy that's on the Tragedy and Hope channel, YouTube channel.
Okay. Technocracy. Okay.
So what his work is with technocracy and, how that kind of the historical origins of technocracy that we're seeing today that's becoming transhumanism. And as Steiner told us, as Rudolf Steiner told us was going to happen, like 100 years from, 1916 or whatever, when he said that, it will be our window that, 2 things are going to be happening, that either we can move into this time where we can free human consciousness or we can become enslaved. And I think, looking at people who, want to move us to some kind of belief system where we want to live in an altered digital reality, that's not human consciousness. But there are people that will do that. Like AR is going to be their life.
Yeah,
and maybe that's okay.
Wow. So, Sasha, back to you. Say something.
It's like I love what you're doing is really bringing the spiritual to the scientific, but it's I think it's really useful to not let that become inflated too, but to embrace the spiritual side of yourself and the mundane side of yourself. Like they say, after enlightenment, carry water.
Yeah, chop wood, carry water. I love that book. Yeah. Oh, that's true. I mean, that's a big thing for the So that's like a big thing for the Institute is like, how grounded are you? Like, are you grounded? Do you have a normal life? Are you, do you have both feet firmly planted on the earth? And that goes into being mature where, I think Hollywood has just made this whole extraterrestrial experience into some kind of a magic show. And it's not a magic show. It's real. It's human. It's gritty. There's a lot of depth and a lot of layers to it and a lot of complexities to it.
So what are some of the things that Hollywood's doing, like in particular, like movies or television shows? I'm watching Strange Angel, which is about Jack Parsons and JPL and how that started. Yeah. And that's a very interesting series.
Yeah. Peter Levenda wrote a lot about Jack Parsons. And do you know Peter Levenda?
Oh, I've had him on, but he was great. I'm going to have him back.
Yeah, he's written some about Jack Parsons and what was going on that whole Church of Satan there. I'm originally, not originally, but I lived much of my life in Dayton, Ohio. And Dayton was sort of, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the whole, Hangar 18, the whole Blue Book ufology project. I mean, that was sort of the Silicon Valley of the Midwest. The Manhattan Project was there. The Engineers Club was the biggest club in town. So it's just interesting how these different, places move around. And then, by the time I moved out of Dayton in 92, I'd seen it gone from 7 or 8 Fortune 500 companies down to one. And everything moved to, California and Silicon Valley and Seattle and so this is kind of moved around by big forces like politics and military, and I think the secret societies, many of them, cooperate with them.
Well, I'm from Pittsburgh, so we weren't so far from each other. And when I was a kid, I'd see all these craft that were obviously either extraterrestrial or experimental reverse engineered things, and the skies were full of it. And I would just tell friends, hey, you want to see something? I would do like a C5 as a kid, right? And you want to see something? Well, let's sleep out in the yard tonight. And we would just, be blown away. So, but then, it moved, I think. All the bases closed. There were little army bases and military bases all over. So, do you know anything why that happened? They decided to move it out to Silicon Valley, or somebody bought a contract or something? I don't know. Something happened there. But so let's talk about
Steve Outram does a lot of work on, how it moved into
Steve Outram, yeah. So you're an experience. We have about 5 minutes before the end of the show. What have you seen?
Well, I'm a direct experiencer, so I'm an experiencer since childhood. So I've had extraterrestrial contact since childhood. About the age of 3 is my first beginning memories. And so I had a lot of contact as a child, and then kind of went through those typical phases that we go through. It's interesting. I'm here in Phoenix in 1997, and I did not see the Phoenix lights.
Oh, you missed it. Oh no.
But it's interesting because I missed the Phoenix lights, and a part of me that crystallized something in me, because I'm really good friends with Linky Tai, and many people in the Phoenix Lights community are friends of mine.
Right.
And we're going to meetings together about it and everything. And I just, I was very transparent about the fact that I missed out on it and I didn't see it. But I knew that my missing out, that because it happened in 97, that I probably, had I seen it, I would have become a ufologist.
Yeah.
Since I did not see it, I really knew that my role this life was to talk more about consciousness. And to, nurture that whole idea of the exoconsciousness, that we humans are exoconscious.
So you think that if you would have gone down the ufologist route, you wouldn't have gone in this direction? Oh, okay.
Not in consciousness. No, I think I would have gone into craft research. I would have gone into, kind of like, the typical ufology thing, which are the real craft.
Oops, we got some feedback. So what kind of, but you did see beings Ignore that feedback. You did see beings starting at 3, and I basically have seen them since the crib. So you're an early experiencer, and I don't think you could have ever gone to nuts and bolts. You would have been too bored.
Probably.
Yeah. So what were they conveying to you at a young age?
I went to the typical star school. You know, I was on the craft. I went to star school. I had extraterrestrial, like my most memorable mentor was a tall white, and I had a lot of just mentorship. I remember being educated in terms of kind of holographic kind of symbols that would come down and hold this immense amount of information. I'm very susceptible to downloads. I mean, the whole time I was working with Edgar, I'd be sent a scientific paper. I am not a scientist. I love science, but I'm not a scientist. And I would just, I'd go to bed at night and I'd read the paper and I'd just say, I need to understand this paper. And in the morning, I'd read it again and I'd understand it. I mean, I'm very susceptible to downloads. I'm really open and flexible and inviting in terms of the guidance from the beings that I communicate with. So I'm also, as a child, I was also, I did shamanic journeying. I went into the earth a lot as a child. I lived in West Virginia, so West Virginia is very poor. It's very full of coal mines. And I had vivid memories of being pulled into the earth and communicate with beings inside the earth, and then, pushing back out of the earth and leaving the earth. And then when I moved to Phoenix, somebody gave me a book on shamans, and I went, oh my golly, I was a shaman, I'm a shaman.
You're a shaman.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the last
as a kid.
Yeah. We're at the last minute of the show. What would you like to say to our listeners about
just if you want to be part of, if you're working with your contact and you're conscious and you're bringing something to the fore with an invention or an art, please join our community and send me an email. It's just exoconscious.com, and I'll put you on our newsletter list.
Thank you. That's a great show. We did it.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you. Rebecca, thank you. Sasha, thank you. Matt Painter, thank you, listeners. Aloha, love, and blessings.
Thank you. Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Narco-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a civil majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound. I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity. I'll do you for that. What? Come here! What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible! You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs!
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. electrical system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger, unafraid, right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite, surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing, in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with the